85% of moms, whether it's your first baby or your 10th, usually go home with stitches. And that's because something this big is coming out of something this big. And usually that means that something's got to give. So it's really normal for a woman to tear during labor. A lot of women wonder if there's anything they can do ahead of time to prevent this from happening. And you may have heard of perineal massage, and this is where you get some oil and massage the perineal body or the muscle and tissue around the vagina to help it stretch before labor. But there's no evidence to prove that this is actually helpful, so you don't need to do it. Imagine that your pelvic floor is like a basket weave of elastics and that there's a bowling ball sitting on top of it. This is basically what it's like when you have your first baby. All of the pelvic floor muscles are really tight, and then a baby has to squish through it, and those tissues need to stretch. So every time you have a contraction, you push, and the force of the contraction and the pushing helps to stretch those tissues so the baby can fit out. Your hardest baby to push out is your first by far, because it's an unfortunate fact of life that you don't quite go back to the way you were after you've already had kids. So the second, third, fourth, however many babies you decide to have, just come out more easily after that point. You usually only have to push for a couple of contractions. So on your first, when you're having to push a long time, usually it's 1 to 2 hours, the nurse will get a little bit of KY jelly and do a little bit of perineal massage in conjunction with the pushing, and that will help things along. And so it doesn't need to be done beforehand, like I mentioned earlier. In fact, the greatest factor that affects whether or not you'll tear is genetics. If you have elastic skin, then you're less likely to tear than if you don't have elastic skin. Now, when it comes to episiotomies, a lot of patients, for them, that's their worst fear, and they ask their doctor, do I need an episiotomy? And this is happening in the office far before labor and delivery. And the doctor's answer would be, we only will do one if we need to, and it's only done for the mother's benefit or the baby's, and we won't know if it's necessary until right before delivery, like the doctor is sitting there in gown and prepped, waiting to catch the baby. That's the point when we decide if one is necessary. Sometimes we need to cut a little episiotomy and expand the vaginal opening so the baby can be born faster because they're experiencing stress. Sometimes it's done to actually prevent the mother from having more complicated tears, and so in the long run, the doctor does it to help the mom. And so your doctor can discuss this with you in greater detail if you have more questions. But again, they're only done if they're necessary, not just for fun. If you had an episiotomy in the past, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll need one in the future. But again, tearing is likely just because of the sheer fact that a baby is coming out. Back to the statistics that I mentioned at the beginning, 85% of moms go home with stitches. So you should just plan on it. And if you don't, then you can just pat yourself on the back and know how lucky you are. Good luck with everything, and if you have more questions for me in the future, please feel free to ask them on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Intermountain Moms, and recommend us to your friends and family too.